Hey, thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, Saurabh, for being here at the show. Today, we'll be discussing more of a master data management, and that's a predominantly a very common subject, but there is a more deep into it. So we'll be discussing that. So I just wanted to introduce my guest here, Malcolm Hawker. He is a head of data strategy of Profisee, and with us also have Saurabh Jha. He's the global head of data analytics and tech manager. Thank you. Welcome both of you to the show. So we wanted to start with master data management trends. So I just wanted to start these questions with Saurabh, with you. So if you could talk about something, what are some modern trends you are seeing into the market, specifically into the master data management, that would be great to start.
Sure, thanks. Thanks so much, Manoj, and welcome, Malcolm. So first of all, I would like to say that, whether it is MDM or governance in general, right, as a part of the whole data management space, I think there is a lot of, positive trend in the market, a lot of consideration being given to these areas, and a lot of demand today. And just a quick background, simply let's understand that the amount of data that the enterprises have today has grown manifold. And it's not just limited to one particular business function or a particular part of business. It's across all the business functions, whether it's customer related, whether it's supply chain related, whether it's production related, and so on and so forth. Now, traditionally, see, MDM has always been very important in an organization. And traditionally, the way MDM and governance have been run have typically been in a central fashion, right? So there's a central master data management tool or a methodology that is adopted. And that's how MDM was, all the products previously had been designed. Same with data governance, typically it had always been centralized. Now, because first of all, the data volumes are growing. Secondly, the importance of data by business function is increasing a lot. And the reason for that is, by business function, the enterprises, they want to gain more and more insights, right? In order to gain more insights, the data has to be in the right shape, right? Right quality, data integrity, and so on and so forth. Now, if you look at historically, MDM has typically focused on the customer side of business. So, and hence it also used to be called as customer MDM. But today, like I said, whether it is supply chain, whether it is production, whether it is customer, today businesses want insight from all of these different business functions. And hence one trend that we are seeing very definitely in the market is that of multi-domain MDM, right? Where whatever the side of business, whatever side of the business it is, like customer assets, products, locations, employees, supply chain, all of those business functions are then managed through a central MDM solution. Now, how that helps, there are multiple benefits of this. One is it helps integrate multiple data domains into a single platform, right? Instead of separating it out and each of them managing their own business. So it helps integrate everything onto a single platform, ensure that we have the single definition all in one place for the entire business. The other is, the organizations can model any master data, right, including relationships between the domains, without buying separate solutions for different MDMs. So whichever business function MDM that they want to look at, customer, product, asset, supply chain, all can be done from one single solution rather than buying it separately for customer MDM or supply chain MDM and so on and so forth. And finally, the businesses can meet the MDM needs of its business users and not just the data governance team, right? So not just the data stewards or the developers for that matter. So that's one. Multi-domain MDM is a definite trend. The other trend that we are seeing is SaaS MDM, which is MDM, which is cloud native. I'm not talking about MDM solutions which are hosted on cloud. I'm talking about MDM solutions which are available on cloud as SaaS service. So that is definitely another trend that that we are observing. Again, multiple benefits which are provided by any SaaS application for that matter, whether it's reduced costs. There is absolutely no compromise in terms of security. The implementation speed and scalability is definitely much better, right? And then there is continuous upgradation. You get access to the latest features in those tools and so on and so forth. So that's another one. And one more that I would like to touch upon is the in I would say the role that AI and ML have started playing in the entire area of MDM, right? And where so this is not about AI ML being used on the consumption side. This is actually using AI to better the quality and integrity of the data, and as a part of it, so AI ML we are seeing which is used in data quality today. It is used for data governance as well, and we are seeing it in MDM as well, right? So that is another area where we are seeing that data deduplication, automated data stewardship, identifying and resolving data quality issues, and all that stuff. So infusing AI and ML into the whole MDM space. So these are the three major trends that I would say that I've been observing in the market, Manoj.
Definitely, yeah. Those are really definitely some important trends. Anything that's Malcolm, you wanted to add on top of this? You have experience and have seen any trends that you want to call out here?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Rob, for that background. What we're seeing, and a lot of what I've been seeing was the last 3 years prior to joining Profisee as the head of data strategy. I was actually an MDM analyst with Gartner, and I've had over the last 3 years, I've had over 1,500 conversations with senior data leaders about what's happening in MDM and what things are important. So some of the key trends that you heard Saurabh share are the root of those are really around digital transformation. So what we're seeing organizations do is really double and triple down on digital transformation. We saw this starting all the way back to early 2020, just as the pandemic was starting to to hit its peak. Companies very, very, very quickly realized that in order to compete in this brave new world that we're in this new world of supply chain disruptions, changing customer needs, building in completely new distribution channels, there were so many disruptions that were caused by the pandemic and really accelerated a lot of the changes that were already underway in organizations. But what we saw is companies rushing to digital transformation because of the pandemic, and those transformations they're not over. They haven't stopped. These things have continued into 2022, and I suspect they will continue beyond. But as a part of those digital transformation, companies were rightfully acknowledging that they needed a foundation of good data, right? They needed a foundation of customer data, product data, asset data, and on and on. So most certainly digital transformation is pushing a lot of companies into the MDM space for the first time. It's causing a lot of companies to reinvest in MDM and revisit their infrastructures, their technologies, their processes, their governance models. And these are really all great things, because for the first time, what we're seeing, I would argue, is this pivot from MDM is kind of a nice to have, or maybe it was phase 2 or phase 3 of an initiative, and now it's really become a must have. And MDM is at the forefront of a lot of the data analytics programs. And I would say that that's a really, really good thing. So Saurabh also touched on a few technologies, a few changes that are happening, particularly AI and ML, of movement to the cloud. I would argue largely these are as a result of scale and a need to scale MDM programs to keep up with this massive growth of data. We keep saying, we have more data than there ever was before. There's more data than there ever was before, and it's true, and it continues because that data is needed to drive those competitive insights that Saurabh was talking about earlier, right? It's needed to fuel the customer experiences that are expected in the digital age. So scale and automation is needed to support all of that additional data. So yes, we're seeing AI and ML for sure. Another technology that we're seeing to help drive those insights is graph, where we're seeing the application of graph analytics, graph databases. Sometimes those are in MDM hubs themselves, and sometimes they're kind of sitting right beside MDM hubs, where graph analytics are run to expose relationships that you wouldn't have otherwise known about with data just persisting in a traditional kind of relational database, right? Where graph is very, very good at showing relationships that you may not have known about. And this can be very, very powerful when you start to understand second and third degree relationships that are sitting in your data. So graph is another technology change that we're certainly seeing here. I think we can expect to see a lot more of that, particularly as we continue to talk about data fabrics, because it's going to be absolutely a key component of data fabrics. Our MDM solutions will be as well. But those are a couple additional things that I would add on to what Saurabh shared earlier in terms of trends in the MDM space.
Perfect. I mean, these are really, really the very modern trends, and thanks for sharing your experience on this. But I mean, when we'll be implementing this, I mean, this is a one questions we regularly comes from the customers, and it's very important for us to convince the customer how they actually will be getting some kind of a benefits out of it, how they will be realizing the ROI of it. So Malcolm, if you could start the discussions on that a little bit and give us some perspective how we can talk through that would be great, and then we'll come to Saurabh.
When I was an analyst, I got this question every day, right? How do we start? And I know you guys hear this in the market all the time as well, right? Where do we start? How do we get started? Do we do our ERP migration first, or do we do MDM first? Do I do governance first, or do I do MDM first? And so many questions, and they're great questions, but really a few things that I would recommend focusing on. One is understanding what the business ROI is going to be. We don't do MDM just for the sake of doing MDM. What business outcomes do you expect to drive through an investment in MDM? Are those digital transformation type outcomes like an improved customer experience, or an optimized supply chain, or an accurate count of your employees, or whatever those outcomes are, understanding those and prioritizing around those outcomes. This really starts to talk about, can I build a roadmap that deploys MDM in phases, where we start simple? A phrase we used to use at Gartner all the time was think big, but start simple when it comes to MDM. Can we develop a longer term strategy that gets us to a point of multi-domain MDM? So I was touching on that. That's where the greatest value can be, is operational multi-domain MDM. But so often we see companies say, okay, that's where we're going to start, and that's our scope, right? We're going to be multi-domain MDM, and we're going to start with all domains, all systems. We want to break all of our silos. We want these great benefits of MDM, but that's really kind of a big bang, really, and we want to try to avoid big bangs. So yes, multi-domain MDM is fantastic, and breaking all your data silos is fantastic, but can you take more of an iterative approach that is based on some prioritized use cases, where maybe instead of that giant big bang that could take 3 to 4 years? This has always been one of the biggest concerns that we hear about MDM, is that it takes too long, right? And that it's very, very costly. But I would argue you can break a large MDM initiative into specific phases, into a roadmap where you maybe focus first on some more tactical aspects of MDM, maybe more analytical insights instead of just purely operational insights. Can you start with maybe doing a 360-degree view of something, right? A 360 of supplier, of customer, of asset, where you're just simply relying on creating some correct analytics, right? Could you use that as a phase one to show some value to your stakeholders, and then slowly build over time? Show success, show business benefit, show ROI, and then do it again, and then do it again. It starts to look kind of almost like an MVP, agile type approach, where you're deploying it in phases. But that's certainly something that I would recommend, is start simple, focus on some easier forms of MDM, maybe an analytical MDM, and grow to that multi-domain enterprise-wide slowly over time. Saurabh, did you have anything you want to add on top of that?
Yeah, actually, I would like to actually add on to what you're saying. So I can see that you're talking from experience, like you said, that you have been doing this for a pretty long time. While not exactly for MDM, but similar initiatives where I've helped organizations prepare what we call as a business case, right, or a ROI case, for example. For example, the ones I used to do was more for cloud modernization and so on. But see, the approach basically remains the same, Manoj, whether it is MDM, whether it is cloud, and so on. See, there are two things that we need to separate here. Right? So one is the necessity of a certain system. And the second thing is, ROI, and how do you measure it, and how do you measure the success of a program? So the first part, which is MDM necessary for an organization? The answer is an emphatic yes, right? So no organization, large enterprise at least, can afford to run, okay? And especially if they have multiple domains, and hence multiple data domains and functions and all. Is it optional for them to have an MDM? Absolutely not. They need an MDM, right? So whether, whether they like it or not, they just have to do it. Now, coming to the business case, when you talk about a business case, I think it relates more to few things. One is how do you want to phase it? What is the strategy? Do you want to, for example, let's say if there's a vendor or there's an SI that comes and say, okay, this is going to take 3 years. Fair enough. There's another one which says 2.5 years and whatever. So let's say we say, okay, 2.5 years is a decent time to implement MDM across multiple domains. When we talk about an ROI, so there are 2-3 things that come into picture. Which product, okay, which one has the faster time to market? How are you prioritizing, for example, your data domains and your strategic initiatives? Which one to go for first? Now, traditionally, most organizations have gone for customer MDM first, and which is absolutely fine, the customer 360 view. And let's say in today's day, probably supply chain, is equally important as customer. And then they could go for, the other domains.
Sure.
And see, when it comes to ROI, I think ROI, like I said, it's more to do with what product, what platform, what timeline, time to market, and so on. And there are, and so that is on, whether I should invest in one thing or the other. Okay, so let's be very clear on that's what ROI is about. At least in this case, it's more to do with cost, time to market, and so on. The other part is how do you measure the success of the program? Now that is very important, right? Because a lot of enterprises, right, have MDM tools, but the question is, have they implemented it properly, right? Is it running, the best state possible, and is it the most efficient? Now, for that, so that is about the efficiency of the program, and for that we need to have clear-cut metrics, business metrics, right? So, for example, if you're talking about customer, for example, we talk about customer retention, customer churn, upsell, cross-sell, invalid customer data, bad quality data, integrity of data, and so on and so forth. So, and you can calculate it percentage-wise or number of instances, per day, per month, per week, whatever. So that is the KPI if you talk about customer 360s. Same thing can be done for supply chain efficiency, for example, whether it is operational cost, inventory levels, and the time to market or launch of a product, and so on and so forth, right? So again, let me just summarize it, because I said multiple things here. One, a business case for MDM, okay? Whether we should have MDM or not, I don't think that part exists. MDM is required. ROI and a business case for a certain solution, that is absolutely needed, right? Whether I should buy this MDM or that MDM, that is absolutely required for different businesses of different sizes, what kind of MDM they want to buy, how complex an MDM system they want to buy. It depends on multiple factors, and that is where this ROI study is absolutely necessary. The third part is, once you have taken a particular solution, how well have you actually implemented it, right? So that is about metrics and how do you, so you have a baseline before you start your program. And then of course you have milestones and you keep on measuring. So these are the 3 things I think we need to keep in mind whenever we are embarking on our MDM implementation in our program.
Definitely. And Saurabh, you talked about one thing that MDM is necessary. I mean, that's you already told, and yeah. But why do you think that MDM is necessary to be a company, to be a future ready? I mean, if you could talk about more on that aspects a little bit of that would be great.
It can actually be a 1-hour answer, but let me try and be short on this. See, MDM is what? It's all about single source of truth, which means at the very basic, what it does is it ensures data quality, right? One part of, one very important aspect of data quality. Of course, there are other things, data errors and data integrity issues and all that stuff, but that's more operational. But you have a single source of truth, whether it is your customers, whether it's your products, whether it's your locations, vendors, supply chain, your plant, machinery, whatever. Without this, any other data, and especially in the world today, if we are saying the data is the future of enterprises, then having a single source of truth of that data is very much an integral part of that future. Because if you have messed up data, then you'll have a messed up future, so to say, right? So having that single source of truth is very, very important. And in order to achieve that, MDM is very, very important, right? So that is a very simple and straightforward answer as to why MDM is absolutely necessary for any enterprise that is looking towards the future and who have to handle a lot of data. There may be organizations that don't have so much data. Maybe there are other simpler solutions and They don't need to go in for a costly, complex MDM solution. But for most businesses, especially enterprises, large enterprises, MDM is an absolute must. Now, I just want to also touch upon a very quick, not exactly related to this answer. As the volume of data grows and the scalability, that enterprises are looking at scaling their size and the data is scaling automatically. We have heard a lot about, for example, data mesh, data fabric, different kind of data ecosystems and different kind of architectures that are currently, being talked about, and enterprises are choosing one or the other, and so on and so forth. Now, when we talk about multi-domain MDM, so see, what is happening is, traditionally, like I said earlier, there was humongous amount of data all managed at one place, right? And that was the general mindset, that bring everything together, let's manage it at one place. But with the scale and the size and the volume of data, it's just becoming more and more difficult. And hence, I think data mesh is one of the conversations that is happening because of this. They're saying, okay, let's not mash up all the data. Let them remain, in their business domains, and which we now know as data domains and data products, right? And now, when the data is in those domains and with the respective business functions, then it becomes their responsibility to also ensure that the data is usable, right? And hence, they also need to ensure that they have their single source of truth, which is another reason why multi-domain MDM becomes very, very important, right? Now, it is debatable whether you need 5 different MDM systems with each business function, or you have one single MDM system that can manage 5 different data domains. But yeah, having a single system typically would be simpler, I believe. But so that is another thing to understand, that there are a lot of trends that that are happening in the marketplace, that are happening in the market today, with enterprises looking at different kind of data architectures and so on. Enterprise data architectures is what I mean, right? So the frameworks and so on, so like data mesh and all. So multi-domain MDM also becomes very important in that aspect. So yeah, absolutely, MDM is necessary, and multi-domain MDM is a logical next step for most enterprises.
Definitely. Data is important, and to become a future-ready organizations, it's very critical to have invested in.
Understand, MDM is a part of data governance, right? So without a governed data, I think that data is not really useful. Malcolm, what do you say? What do you think?
I couldn't agree more. Right, MDM is a foundational pillar of a data governance initiative, and until you have trustworthy, consistent, accurate, integrated data across all of your operational systems, it's going to be very, very hard to scale your organization. It's going to be very hard to fulfill the digital transformation. So I completely and totally agree. A few kind of other things to think about from the perspective of MDM being necessary, and I couldn't agree more. Totally agree. It's a must-have. It's not a nice to have.
Yeah.
A few specific things come to mind. One I've already touched on before, which is just simply kind of operational scale and efficiency, right? And being able to operate at scale in ways that organizations have never had to in the past, right? When capturing data all the way from social channels, and where there are signals about intent, all the way through a customer lifecycle. Could be a product lifecycle as well, where people are interacting with products, but all the way from the very, very first time a customer sees your product or makes some signal of an interest about your product, all the way through its lifecycle to ERP, and all the way through even to data archival and data management. So that across that entire lifecycle, there's more and more data, and it's all valuable, and it can provide some incredible insights. So MDM will sit underneath all of that data and help you provide additional context around the things that really matter. Not all data is created equally. This is one of the key tenets of MDM, which is master data. There's some data that matters more than other data. And when you're managing terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of data in a large estate, how do you know which data points matter more than others? That comes down to MDM, and it comes down to governance, because it really inherently is about a governance policy around how do I define a customer or an asset or a product or any other master data domain. So really, the scale required here requires MDM. And then there are specific use cases. Saurabh, you touched on some of these already. You were talking about supply chain. We could talk most certainly about the customer experience and customer centricity. I think we all have examples in our lives of when it's done well, when a company is acting in a customer-centric way, and then there are examples of when it's not done well, right? And how often have you ever called in maybe to a customer support line where they didn't know that you had a ticket open, or that they didn't know that you had a previous interaction with them, or where it was positive or negative. I checked into a hotel a couple of days ago that I'd stayed at multiple times, but they were treating me like I was the first-time customer, right? So those are just a couple of small examples of not being customer-centric, where clearly the data in those situations had allowed an opportunity to be missed, right? There were opportunities to be missed around treating me in a more customer-centric way. Of course, compliance has always been a part of MDM, right? And making sure that an organization is operating in a regulatory friendly or compliant way. We've seen this for a long time in the banking and insurance space, in terms of like KYC, know your customer. It's really, really tough to know your customer if you have duplicate records for that customer, or if your data is not trustworthy or inaccurate. There's obviously a lot of privacy regulations that are at play going on right now across the world. A lot of this started with GDPR and CCPA here in the US. And I think we're going to see more and more of those types of policies, more policies related to the right to be forgotten, or giving consumers more control over their own data. But again, the core of all of this is a customer or a product or a location or an asset, where if you don't know who your customers are, if you don't have accurate, consistent data there, it's going to be awfully difficult to ensure you are operating in a compliant way. So these are a few of the reasons why MDM is absolutely necessary. But Saurabh, you're right. This could be an hour-long conversation in and of itself.
True. I mean, I understand. But now, so that we understand that the ROI, that the benefits, how the organizations can realize through master data management, and it's very important for them to be a future-ready organizations. Then those CXO leaders who are embarking this into the journey, they are starting or just have started the master data management journey. Any advice for them, Malcolm, if you would like to tell them anything, any advice or any best practice you would like to share with them?
Yeah, I used to, when I was having conversations day in and day out, and I still do with CIOs and CDOs, and we talk about the business value of MDM, or the business value of governance and the program itself. So absolutely, there is an ROI that's going to be tied to investments in technology, most certainly, and you have to do that. I think most organizations, in order to get funding, should have some form of an ROI of a technology investment. But there's also an ROI that would be associated to the investment in the program itself, right? MDM and governance are programs, right? These are not one and done, right? These are programs that will live for years and years. And how do you show the ROI of those programs themselves? I would often hear from CIOs and CDOs, well, they'd say, well, Malcolm, that sounds great, but that's really hard, right? And some of them would even argue that it's kind of impossible, because it's difficult to tie improvements in data to improvements in business performance. And yes, that may be true, but I would argue it's most certainly not impossible, right? You most certainly can tie improvements to data, whether that's master data or whether that's just better data quality in general, to better performance of your business. And the example that I would often give, and there are many examples, we could talk about supply chain optimization. Saurabh had mentioned earlier, a number of different kind of business KPIs. Really comes down to your priority. What is the highest priority? But let's take customer centricity, for example, or maybe optimization of a sales process. One of the examples that I used to give all the time here was cross-sell and upsell, right? And using MDM as a lever to help you understand the depth of your relationship with a given individual consumer or B2B customer. Are you selling across all divisions of a specific company, right? Can you implement a robust corporate hierarchy as a part of an MDM initiative and a governance initiative that will give you visibility that you didn't have before, trustworthy visibility to allow you to say, I'm selling to division A, but I'm not selling to division B. That's a sales opportunity. And most organizations that I work with can quantify what a sale is worth to them. So that's one fairly concrete example of, if you can improve the data quality, if you can build a robust hierarchy and have that managed in MDM to show where there may be sales opportunities that you didn't know about before, That's real ROI. That's just one example of one KPI or a couple cross-sell, upsell. And there are literally hundreds in the MDM space where I would argue that a CDO can work internally with their business stakeholders and sit down and start to model out what some of these impacts would be and actually come up with a true business case, a prioritized business case where you have ROI that is tied to KPIs, where you are delivering against those KPIs as a part of an MDM roadmap over time. So you can absolutely align KPIs from an MDM perspective and a data quality perspective to a business perspective. It's finding the right people in the organization, it's building out the right models, it's acknowledging that these models will evolve over time. They're never going to be perfect in day one. They will most certainly evolve, but they are most certainly doable and something that I would absolutely recommend to any CIO or CDO who's looking at MDM.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Malcolm, for sharing that. Saurabh, what is your thoughts on that? I mean, anything you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, so first of all, I would like to second what Malcolm said. I think these KPIs, I know a lot of people, like he said, they think it's not possible, but I think it's absolutely possible. And there are multiple ways of going about it. Like I said, you can baseline where you are today, and you can keep on looking at the milestones every quarter or half a year, whatever it is. Second is you can also reverse look. So say, for example, if you do an RCA, root cause analysis, so let's say if there were X number of customer complaints, right? Or say for different kind of reasons. For example, let's say a customer had multiple complaints which had been filed. And when they called into the call center and, and the call center did not know that the complaints are already filed, or when, there are multiple identities of the customer existing in the system, you can start from there as to why did that happen in the first place? And, what is the root cause of it? Because there was no single source of truth. And how many such instances are there? And then give a target to business that, okay, these things need to come down. Same with cross-sell and upsell, for example, right? So how many people did you target, let's say on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, and so on with, with upselling of your products? How many of them went wrong that you actually went and tried to sell a wrong product to that person? So there are various ways of, deriving these KPIs, absolutely possible and absolutely should be done. Because see, at the end of the day, businesses, enterprises are going to spend money on this, right? So, and they need to get the return for it. While we, like I earlier said, is this absolutely necessary? The answer is yes, but that does not mean that, because see, again, it's the second part. How well have you implemented it, right? So because there could be an IT organization that buys a large fancy MDM solution and then does a shoddy job of implementing it. How will the business or the senior leadership or the CXO, how will they ever know that, that a really bad job was done of implementing this particular solution, which is so critical and important for my business? So yeah, so KPIs there. Now coming to, what else, what other things that organizations need to keep in mind? Just one thing, very, very important, right? See, MDM at the end of the day is a subset of larger data governance process, right, within an enterprise. And for a long time, and unfortunately, even today, and this is based on my experience with some of our customers, even today, a lot of these, just because there is a technology product involved, right, or an IT product or a software that's involved, it is still seen as an IT project, right? It's seen as an IT initiative or a tech initiative. It's not. Data governance, MDM, is definitely not a tech initiative, right? The responsibility of ensuring that that you have the right single source of truth, that your data is proper, is squarely the responsibility of the business owners. See, the IT folks, the data folks, they are supposed to use that data to provide you with insights or dashboards or whatever. But to ensure that the definitions and the and the way you are capturing your customer data or your supply chain data or your products data or whatever, that is absolutely a business responsibility. And I still see time and again, whenever such programs, as Malcolm rightly said, these are not short-term 2-month projects. These run into years, right? 1, 2, 3 years. The involvement of business, yes, in some cases it is there. In a lot of cases, it is still not. And if you want to see, if you want to see a case of MDM or in general data governance implementation or program failure, I think the root cause of it would be that the IT and the business team did not sit together and did not implement it together. So I think it's very, very important for CXOs and all these stakeholders, who are responsible for such programs to realize that the business has to sit at the table with the tech folks and the IT folks to implement programs such as these. Because data governance is a joint responsibility. It cannot be thrown over the wall to IT that, oh, my data is inaccurate. It's inaccurate because you did not define something properly somewhere, right? So that's very important, Manoj.
Definitely. I mean, that's very well said. I mean, these are really, really good advice for the CXOs, definitely. So we actually have discussed a lot many things here. I mean, and there are a lot many things left behind also to be discussed. I mean, it's really small discussions. So we talked about ROI, we talked about why MDM is important, how the organizations can implement those things. But definitely, this is a very value-added discussions, Malcolm and Saurabh. Both of you have given very knowledge sharing sessions here. So thank you very much for both of you. And thank you very much for your time. Thanks.
Thank you, Manoj.
Thank
Thanks, Malcolm, for your time. It was indeed a great discussion.
Thank you both. I enjoyed it.